Play, create, share. 3 little words that made a young Remy scream like a 6-year-old in box fights. Back on the PlayStation 3, Sony started pushing this play, create, share initiative, initially slapping it on LittleBigPlanet as a funny little tagline before trying to evolve it into a whole brand and, evidently, letting it fall into obscurity. The premise was simple: ship a game, give it a decent little campaign, whatever, but give it some sick level creation tools and the means to instantly share them with hundreds of thousands of others. The power to create anything within the boundless limits of imagination was finally in the hands of the player. And create a penis made of sponge they did. LittleBigPlanet, developed by Media Molecule, was immensely popular, receiving 3 mainline titles across PS3 and PS4, as well as full featured entries for both of Sony's handhelds, becoming a flagship PlayStation franchise. LittleBigPlanet 3, though, may as well have been the bullet in this tagline's heart, as we haven't seen a game from this series since. At least not one with a level editor. Sackboy: A Big Adventure is great, but no level editor was such a missed opportunity for a 3D LittleBigPlanet. The play, create, share branding was never really utilised all that much though, only ever used on maybe 2 different franchises, but what little it gave us very much shaped my late teens and early 20s. I spent many hours building my own little set of levels in LittleBigPlanet 2, where you'd venture across the galaxy to defeat my evil high school librarian who, kid you not, threw a DVD player at a kid from my year. High school was funny, but when I wasn't making the worst levels ever made, I was hopping over to PlayStation's other big community-focused game, ModNation Racers. Where LittleBigPlanet was mostly about making puzzle platformers in a world of arts and crafts, ModNation Racers said, what if we took Mario Kart and let people create their own zany racetracks in it? And create a penis made of tarmac they did. This was my hyperfixation for maybe a year or so. As a kid, I had a dozen exercise books filled with doodles of fake tracks. Why, yes, I was diagnosed with autism, why do you ask? So to be able to take those doodles and recreate them in a game and be able to share them with others? My bin is an Xbox! I've hyped up ModNation on BlueSky and X, let's be real, it's not Twitter anymore, more times than I've changed my undies over the course of my life, so I figured it was time to talk about it in a video. Going in, I was a little worried that nostalgia was clouding my view of it a bit, and that ModNation might actually have been a pretty average and forgettable game that I only ever took interest in because of the track editor. Thankfully, this is not the case. But there are some things that make ModNation a bit of a tough recommendation in 2024, especially to those who weren't there to experience it at the height of its popularity and with all of its functionality. Oh my god, are you still not done loading? This is like 3 Metal Gear Solid Ground Zeroes! So a few of you might be looking at this and thinking, well, this just kinda looks like any old kart racer. Even with a track editor, why would I buy this over Mario Kart, or Crash Team Racing, or Action Girls Racing? You of course would only be thinking this if you were blind, or just generally a dickhead. Because ModNation has got quite a few things going for it that really set it apart from its contemporaries. At a base level, yeah, sure, it's your standard kart racer, pick up items, avoid obstacles, drift around corners, hit boost pads, have RNG hold you at knife point, the usual genre staples. There are 2 big changes that set it apart though. The first, and probably the most important, is this big ol' meter on the side, which is required for a number of different actions. You fill it up by drifting, getting airtime, performing 360-degree spins in the air, and hitting opponents, and you'll probably find its primary use is hitting L1 to boost. With enough juice in the caboose though, you'll not only be able to sideswipe opponents with the right stick to temporarily disable them, but you'll also be able to form a shield around you, guarding you from any incoming damage. This uses a lot of energy though, as a single press uses up around 1/4 of the meter, so you have to be pretty spot on with your timing or hold the button down if you want to be safe, which of course uses up way more energy. Already, this creates an interesting dynamic that sets ModNation apart, a really exciting risk versus reward mechanic. Do you risk boosting ahead of the pack, or do you save some energy for a shield to protect against a Bolt Storm or a Sonic Rift? In other kart races, whether you can defend or not depends on whether you have an item at the time, which can lead to plenty of frustrating moments where you feel kinda hopeless. Here, while there's still a touch of randomness regardless, when I got hit by an item, I felt like it was my fault a lot of the time because I'd chosen to use my meter to boost or sideswipe instead of playing defensively. The weapon system's also a bit different than you might expect. When you pick up an item box, ball, thingy, whatever, you get one of 4 items, a rocket, a lightning bolt, a sonic blast, and a standard boost. Most of these are pretty useless on their own, especially the bolt, as the trail doesn't affect anyone who drives through it and the hitbox of the projectile itself is the size of a pin. By picking up another sphere of calamitous intent, however, your currently held weapon will be upgraded, up to a maximum of level 3. The boost, for example, becomes longer and more powerful at level 2, then just says stuff it and warps you ahead at level 3. Or the aforementioned entirely useless bolt becomes a projectile at level 2 that homes in on the opponent ahead of you and even shocks nearby opponents upon contact, while level 3 summons a the storm that strikes everyone ahead of you and makes their currently held weapon go. None of these weapons are mines or banana peels though, but by holding the fire button you can instead turn your currently held weapon into a mine. Level 1 mines disappear after a few seconds, level 2 mines stay until someone hits them, and level 3 mines have a much larger area of effect. Again, just another example of how the game offers you more choice at any given opportunity, making it so much more engaging and dynamic. Additionally, level 3 weapons always become some sort of track wipe, like a blue shell combined with the Rhinocerator from Ratchet & Clank 3, which sounds annoying at first, but the simple addition of a shield button makes this not only tolerable, but exhilarating. Shielding through a sonic rift around the final turn, then using what little boost you have to zip over the finish line is peak kart racing. And exciting moments like this are just straight up the norm in ModNation. Now, the driving itself, kinda varies. By no stretch is it bad, but there are a few wrinkles. Particularly, karts feel quite a bit heavier than you'd think, and you really feel that weight as you initiate a turn a little slower than you'd expect, so it takes some adjustment. Drifting will feel pretty familiar to genre veterans, though it probably most resembles that of the Sonic All-Stars Racing series, and there's a pretty decent sense of speed overall. At its absolute core, ModNation is pretty decent. Above par, one would say. One would be stupid to say that, because isn't that a golf analogy? Aren't you supposed to get below par in golf? Humans are stupid. Compared to other kart racing games though, ModNation definitely isn't as tight, and it ends up being a little too chaotic at the worst of moments. If you get lifted into the air, pick a god and pray, because there's a not negligible chance that you'll end up flung off the track or into an out-of-bounds area. Drifting is also a bit wider than you might initially expect, which can make some of the late game tracks a bit of a pain in the ass. You can use left or right to lean into the drift or countersteer and widen it, of course, but it lacks something like Mario Kart, where you can slam the brakes to tighten your drift even further, or Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing Transformed, where letting go of the accelerator achieves a similar effect. Doing either technique here just cancels the drift, which is handy in its own way, but it doesn't feel as mechanically satisfying as its contemporaries, and it results in the game having an overall lower skill ceiling. Not that it doesn't take skill to win, as evident in the vast majority of my gameplay here, but yeah, I don't think ModNation is remembered for the racing itself. It's good, it's just far from the game's strongest aspect. The racing is wrapped up in a neat little single-player career mode where you race, drift, and transform into copious explosions through 28 tracks across 5 tours, or 43 tracks across 8 tours if you have the DLC. And by you, I mean me, because I bought it before it got delisted. I get to race around in the big city biome. I bet you're jealous, aren't you? You only have to come 3rd or higher to progress through to the next event, first if it's the final race of the tour, but if you want to unlock stuff, you're going to be put to work big time. Each event has 3 challenges that give you a bunch of new items and props to use in the kart, character, and track editors. And these challenges can range from basic stuff like get 50,000 drift points or take down 3 opponents, to more specific stuff like hit this specific opponent in front of the grandstands. The 2 bonus objectives in any race can be tricky, not least of all because you also need to finish first to achieve them.
I beat Radon on the Elden Ring DLC. It can't be that hard.
Bitch, Radon ain't got shit on trying to win without touching any walls on craggy hills.
No.
There are also 5 tokens deviously hidden on every track, which you can take to a vendor back in the hub area to win some more parts and props through a little gacha system. I mean, do I even need to keep playing? Most races are broken up by a simple little story about the player character entering the ModNation Racing Championship, hosted by Gary Reasons, the sweetest man who ever lived, and Biff Treadwell, the most insufferable c*** to ever grace existence. Nah, I got beef with Biff, man. Gary's out here trying his darndest to commentate on races, and here's Biff, so committed to bullying Gary that he outs himself as gay.
Any idea who I'd like to break up with, Gary?
Is it me?
Survey says...
Fellas, is this toxic yaoi? I'm a sucker for games that let you make little guys, then watch them do silly stuff in cutscenes though, and the pre-race shenanigans are often pretty funny. I made Remy, as best I could. They're kinda oiled up, that's fine. They can be oiled up every now and then as a treat. And the only mouth I had unlocked with this shape was under the missing tooth category, so for a while my headcanon was Remy got the snot beaten out of them after doing stuff like this because they're a deliberately antagonistic cheeky bastard. The story itself isn't the next Disco Elysium or whatever, it's predictable and it's filled with tropes, but seeing your character in cutscenes helps alleviate that issue, as does the fact that it's clearly taking the piss out of underdog racer narratives anyway, with stuff like sabotage, a pit chief who retired from racing after a major accident, and signing deals with shady sponsors.
See that dotted line right there? That line will fill your pockets with green. And I don't mean paint.
Conservative Motors? I don't know, this seems kinda shady. But I do like money. urge to buy a Cybertruck rising. Almost became an irredeemable piece of shit there. The career mode's fun. I think Biff always responding to Gary with an insult gets a bit tiresome, but it's still an enjoyable dynamic. The track themes are a bit repetitive and maybe not visually distinct enough, and I think voting in a guy who is literally a convicted felon isn't such a bad idea, but it's still pretty good. There was still a bit of piece of shit left in me. All gone. Let's not linger on that. Let's go make stuff. This is what the game is remembered for. ModNation has a whole suite of creation tools, not only letting you customize your kart and character, your mod as the game calls it, but even create and decorate your own custom tracks. Mod creation is limited in a couple areas as you only get one body shape, but there are a ton of clothing and facial options, and being able to place stickers and odds and ends all over your mod's body allows for some creative solutions to bringing your OC or favorite character to life. Fun fact, in my OC canon, Remy is actually an anti-gravity racer, so instead of the usual hoodie and trackies combo, I stuck him in a racing suit instead. Remy also races on their transforming bike-robot hybrid friend Talon, who I tried to replicate here, even though he's a bike and there's no bikes in the game, and even though I realized most people were going to look at this and immediately picture Lightning fucking McQueen, which has got me questioning the little dude's design a bit, but no well. Kart creation is pretty decent in its own right. There's a slew of kart bodies to use, from exotics and muscle cars to lawnmowers and planes, and you can slap on spoilers, change the engine, apply stickers and accessories, and even change the ride height. Whether you want to build something that looks like it'd dominated the Daytona 500 or fall apart if an awe-struck child so much as pointed at it, you're pretty set. But the real meat and bones of ModNation is the track editor. I could gush about this thing for hours. It's powerful enough to allow for some really awe-inspiring tracks while being simple enough to use that anyone can make a pretty decent little circuit in a pretty short amount of time. Take, for example, the process of creating the track layout itself. In other games, this is where you'd select from a list of prefab straights and corners and place them down like you're making a Hot Wheels track. Adorably, ModNation instead has you drive and lay the track down behind you. Then you can head into the menu and tweak individual segments of the track to be sharper or wider or form banks and so on. You can alter the terrain, repave any parts you want to change, create shortcuts, or lay breadcrumb trails for the AI to follow when you don't want them to adhere specifically to one path in a section, and placing props is as seamless and painless as picking the dog spray and littering the track. There is a limit to how many dogs your track can have, which is a bit of a travesty. I didn't tinker too much with the track editor for this playthrough for time and a couple other reasons we'll get to in a sec, but ModNation accommodates for the former with features such as auto-populating your track with roadside props and gameplay items like weapon pods, ramps, and obstacles. You'll have to go out of your way to make something really good, of course, but it's really cool how you can jump in, lay down a track, and have it looking not too far off from something you'd see in the career mode. And surprisingly, I didn't make a track shaped like a cock and balls. I made something even better. Yoshi Circuit, eat your heart out. Okay, Remy's circuit isn't very good. It looks more like a dog that got hit in the head with a tennis ball. But the point is, ModNation's track editor is amazing, and currently it is trapped in a game where I do not want to tinker with it any further. For one, and I think this is the biggest thing against ModNation overall, the PS3 really holds it back. In races, it's more than playable, though too much carnage on screen causes the frame rate to dip quite a bit, but it's menus and navigation where the game suffers most. That loading screen from earlier, that was not doctored footage. It legitimately takes 52 seconds to load into a race. 52! And when most races are only around 3 minutes, that means you're spending at least a quarter of game time looking at this screen and listening to the same few songs. The songs are great, don't get me wrong, but this is excessive, even by PS3 standards. This is only exacerbated when navigating menus and using editors. Selecting different parts and facial features can itself take several seconds sometimes, which makes deciding between several parts or even just scrolling to the bottom of a category a nightmare. And the same goes for navigating prop menus and editing road surfaces in the track editor. What are you, hourly? Good lord. Admittedly, I'm pretty sure my PS3 is getting on a bit, but comparing it to footage on the internet, I wouldn't say it's significantly worse than playing it on launch day. And with PS3s in general being between 12 and 18 years old, this might be a common experience for anyone trying to play this in current year regardless. The other big issue though is no fault of the game itself, but instead simply being a victim of the inevitabilities of online gaming. ModNation Racers is of course not only delisted now, along with all its DLC, but the servers have been taken offline too, ripping a whole third from the play, create, share tagline. Sure, you can play, and you can sure as heck create, but without the means to share, ModNation feels like a bit of a shell of its former self. Back when the servers were online, the game's hub area, the ModSpot, was something else. From here you can enter the career, quick race and creation tools even when offline, but when it was online you'd be able to see the best creations of the week, do weekly hot laps, watch fellow players doing donuts around the center, and of course, download other players' creations. This was the bread and butter of ModNation, and without it, with all these "sorry, the servers are down" messages all over the ModSpot, it feels like eating an unbuttered sandwich. Yeah, it's plenty edible, but it's kinda dry, right? And what do you mean Americans don't butter their sandwiches? What do you mean? But yeah, ModNation is a pretty neat little game in its own right, but it really was dependent on players sharing their own creations and hosting online races with them. And without that, it's missing maybe a bit too much of its appeal. For this video, I was originally planning to make my own little collection of courses, but 2 tracks in and I found I simply couldn't be bothered, because why would I suffer through the loading times and crappy performance to make tracks that no one but me would ever get to play? For fun? Do I look like I do things for fun? I keep a media thread on BlueSky and my backlog in a spreadsheet. I don't play for fun, I play for autism. Jokes aside, this is why I find it a little tough to recommend playing ModNation Racers in 2025. I've talked it up like nothing else in the past, but now that I've replayed it, it strikes me as the kind of game I'd recommend wholeheartedly to people only for them to be like, I mean, it's neat, I guess. While the creation tools are incredible and you can still use them, they only feel like something to tinker with a few times instead of properly engaging with, now that the servers are offline. So while it's a great game in its own ways, and I still think a lot of people will enjoy it, it's a little difficult to recommend when the core gameplay and track design isn't as good as, say, Mario Kart, Sonic All-Stars Racing, or Crash Team Racing. And it pains me to say that because it's really no fault of its own, it's simply a victim of time. Online games don't last forever, but the ModNation Racers I grew up with, the ModNation Racers I loved, no longer exists. At least not without the support of fans. If you feel like messing around with an emulator or homebrew, you can currently share creations online through ModNation Racers Revival. I'll leave a link in the description below if you're at all curious. If we can't get a remaster, this might be the next best thing. And at the very least, ModNation Racers wasn't a one and done affair. In fact, ModNation Racers also released on the PlayStation Portable. Not as a port down the line, but a full-fledged same-week release. And it's nearly feature complete too. Mod, kart, and track editors are all present and accounted for, despite lacking a few things like sticker customization and bridges. Understandably so. I'm saving this one for a future video though, but it's extremely impressive how they managed to fit ModNation onto the PSP in almost its entirety. Except for the fact that the racing is dookie, the physics are way off, and some stuff like upgrading weapons with further pickups was axed for whatever reason. At least the loading times don't suck you into an inescapable event horizon. Portable ModNation did get kind of a second wind on the Vita though, with the launch title ModNation Racers Road Trip. This one plays pretty much one-to-one to the PS3 game, which is an excellent showcase of what Sony's ill-fated but incredible little handheld could do, if you ignore all the performance issues, and the complete lack of cutscenes and notable characters, and the fact that you can only navigate menus with the fucking touchscreen. Yeah, this one's more or less a tech demo for the Vita, and the review scores reflect that rather negatively, but this was like one of maybe 3 games on the Vita I ever finished, so that counts for something. I did just say the Vita was great, yes, but the library was trash unless you wanted 6 out of 10 JRPGs and ports of Borderlands 2 and Ratchet & Clank where important controls are mapped to the rear touchpad. Ugh. While that might have been the end for ModNation Racers as a franchise, its spirit lived on, as ModNation developers United Front Games, along with help from San Diego Studio, went on to make LittleBigPlanet Karting, a game that I despised when I first played it. To me, it was basically, what if ModNation Racers was worse? I had it out for the game, dude. If I were Aku, this would have been my Samurai Jack. On a recent replay, I set my unbridled vitriol aside and found that it's actually pretty decent. It has Devo and Anamanaguchi in it. How could I have ever possibly hated it? I do still think it's worse than ModNation, as it swaps out the energy bar and weapon upgrading for the more standard kart racing affair of hoping Lady Luck and Lady Rubber Banding are in your favour that day, and character and kart customization is heavily dialed back, but track themes are more varied and track creation itself is more powerful than ever. I prefer ModNation's editor though. If ModNation is like RPG Maker, LBP Karting is like trying to learn something like Unity or Godot by comparison. You can build way cooler stuff, and even stuff that isn't necessarily kart racing, but you gotta put in the effort, and frankly, that's just too much effort to put into making silly penis-shaped tracks. On that note, Sony, please, look at stuff like Roblox and Fortnite and GTA Online and tell me the masses don't want to make willies in ModNation. Look me dead in the eyes and tell me that. You can't, can you?